I don't know what esteemed means. Thank you, Dan, for having enough faith in me to allow me to do this. How many of you have read the 45 goals of the Communist Party to take over America at least twice? Okay. All right. I'm going to give you some quick background on my experience with all of this. 1945, June, I was born 18 days before they set off the first nuclear bomb test. 1950, my grandmother bought the family a television set. Those are kind of brand new to people, specifically so we could watch the Korean War newsreels. My grandmother was born in 1898, and she saw all the horrors that were brought about by the communists in Russia. She was 19 years old when they took over, when the communists took over Russia in 1917. She was 36 years old when the socialist Nazis took over her mother, Germany, and just devastated it, millions of people killed. And she lectured us kids, I had two brothers, on just how vile and horrible the experience that the world had had with the collectivism that is either under the name of socialism or communism. It just, millions of people have been killed according to her, and she painted a very dark picture of what the world would be like under communism, and told me that she wouldn't live long enough, that I would live to see social and economic chaos that would make her depression look like a Sunday afternoon church social. 1952, I'm in second grade, and all of the teachers that I had run across were great American patriots. And I remember this teacher specifically talking about how intelligent these people were to design a government, that the federal government would be kept so minimal that it wouldn't have much money to or power that would attract the greedy, and the criminal element into the federal government. That it was supposed to be kept as small as possible, and everything else left over to the states and the people, respectively. And so, since all these people had been in World War II in one way or another and grew up through the Great Depression, I had a lot of respect for the Council of the Elders. So that's where my basic background came from, as to appreciating liberty and freedoms as opposed to collectivism, communism, and whatnot. 1956, my father runs for City Council of Pomona, California. He takes me, I was still 10 years old in the springtime, out into a couple of the precincts that were kind of the slums of East Los Angeles, because none of his other two campaign workers would work it, and he taught me. My dad is Dick Brownell. He's running for city council. Will you vote for him? What you doing in this neighborhood, little white boy? My dad, and I'd hand out the flyer and mark on the precinct sheet, whether they were favorable toward my father or not, and move on. My dad won all three of the precincts that I walked. And he was elected to the city council. And later on, he became mayor of Pomona, California. Well, now let's move on to 1963, the year that I graduated from high school. So many of my buddies went right into the Army and the military under Jack Kennedy. I went on to a 2-year college, and I had an elective of political science. Since I had such a background working on my dad's political campaigns and whatnot, I knew the vernacular and whatnot. And what did I run into but Professor Frederick Hoyt, who talked about how great communism was and how absolutely terrible free markets and capitalism in our Constitution. And I was absolutely stunned. The next thing he does is bring out the 45 goals of the Communist Party to destroy Destroy America. This is my well-worn copy. And he says, he told the class that he was in number 17. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum, get control of the teachers' unions, and put the party line in textbooks. If anybody of you are reading through that, I've got that one down pat. Okay? And this professor told us, this is 1963, that he was on the leading edge of that goal number 17 to take control of the schools. And since I talk politics, he and I engaged in a lot of conversations after class. He said, you're a capitalist. You probably have ambitions to do something in the business world, and you'll run off to the thrills and spills in the private sector, and you're just going to walk away and leave education to us. It's going to be easy for us to take over education. And I never believed that a program like this, these 45 goals, ever stood a chance in 1963, because we were a great, free, liberty-minded, capitalistic system that was doing really good. Everybody was making money and there's chicken in every pot, and things were running along really great. But this guy inspired me to look around, and on the news in those days, the communists were full-blown and making big stinks, spitting on. Any of you Vietnam vets? Okay.
I'm not a Vietnam vet, but I was in the service here in Vietnam.
Yeah, you remember how they were spit on and everything when they came home? This was the doings of this one particular communist that loved to be in front of the television. His name was Bill Ayers. And I discovered that Bill Ayers and I are the same age. He was born in December 24th of 1944. I was born June 28th of 45. So there's only 6 months difference between us. So basically we're the same age. And here he is spouting off all this stuff that he's a good friend of Mao Zedong, he's a good friend of Fidel Castro, he's a good friend of Che Guevara, he's a good friend of Nikita Khrushchev, and when he creates this full-blown, bloody, racial revolution in the United States here within a few months, that he was going to get to sit at the head of the table of the World Communist Party for bringing the United States into the communist bloc. Once again, I thought, he didn't stand a snowball's chance in hell of pulling this off. You know, not one bit. But I followed Bill Ayers. I went to the UCLA many times. That was really the center of the communist movement in Southern California. They were at other colleges too. And I also went to see William Buckley. I just loved William Buckley. But I saw Stokely Carmichael. I saw Angela Davis in person give their speeches, and they were good public speakers. They got the people riled up. Yay, 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 that's what we've got to do. And I'm thinking, look at them manipulating the masses. And these are college students that they basically controlled the journalism classes, and they controlled most all this, what do you call them, social science classes. And it began to really disturb me. 1965, the Watts riots was getting going on Friday afternoon, August the 17th. And on all Fridays, we always went down to Ascot Park, a half-mile oval, watched the motorcycle races, and saw the smoke begin to billow up from the riots going on there. They came on the PA and said, do not take the Harbor Freeway to the interchange because there's shooting going on, it's dangerous. We were 20 years old, and what the hell. We drove up the Harbor Freeway, and John was driving, I was sitting shotgun. The whole, I mean, you're talking about flames shooting 200, 300 foot high from both sides of the street when we got up to, I think it was the Slauson overpass, and traffic had come to a stop. So there I was, there's the guardrail, and I'm looking down on Slauson Boulevard, machine gun nest by the National Guard right down below us, flames coming up everywhere, people running around with TV sets on the streets and whatnot, and getting ready to, the National Guard was getting ready to make a movement when the traffic honking at us, we had to go. But Bill Ayers was there too. Bill Ayers was at the Watts riots because he had been instrumental in getting the Black Panthers going back then. Do you remember the Black Panthers? Think of the Black Panthers now as Black Lives Matter because it's the same people, okay? Same organization. Well, I read, this many years later, I read that Frances Fox Pivens was also at the Black Lives. She was a Weather Underground member with Bill Ayers, and she said, you know, they put down this riots and don't think we're ever going to be able to get the American public to rise up for our communist cause. We're going to have to think of some other ways to go. She went back to Columbia University in New York, and they came out with the Cloward-Pivens strategy to bankrupt America. Does that ring a bell with any of you people?
What did you call it?
The Cloward-Pivens strategy to bankrupt America. Her husband, Cloward-Pivens, so that's how they call it, Cloward-Pivens strategy. They were in the political science, social parts of the university at Columbia in New York City, and they started putting out this idea that how America is such a troubled, difficult thing, we have to, the best way to get rid of them is, one of the best ways is to bankrupt them. While the other members of the Weather Underground, Bill Ayers in particular, he had to go on the run. They put out their manifesto, the Prairie Fire Manifesto of the Weather Underground in 1971. They said, we are communists. We dedicate this manifesto to Che Guevara, probably one of the purest communist minds. Most of the other communists got caught up in all their power and wealth, whereas he was, you know, just out murdering people, forcing them to get them to do things. But Bill Ayers dedicated this manifesto to Che Guevara, and just one of the scariest individuals on the American scene. Well, they did some bombings, killed some people, blew up police departments and several offices in Washington, D.C. They got caught for it. Him and Bernardine Dohrn went on the run for about 10 years, and I kind of forgot about Bill Ayers. This was in the early 70s because he just disappeared from the scene.
He didn't disappear.
Say again?
He didn't disappear. He went to Chicago.
I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that. And I kind of lost track of him because I didn't hear about him anymore. And now let's move forward to 2006. I met a family, their last name was Bair, B-A-I-R. They had a condo down here at the lake, and there was 8 of them. They were all from Springfield, Illinois. Springfield, Illinois. They all worked for the state government in Springfield, Illinois. This is 2006. I had seen Obama's 2004 speech at the convention, and there was some word going around that he was going to be running for president. And so I asked the Bears, we were all at a big dinner one time, I said, do you know anything about this Obama guy? And what? And they all told me stories about what a creepy guy to be in meetings with, but then one of them said, he's connected to Bill Ayers and the Communist Party. And oh, I had a computer by then, I knew how to work it. So I did some research, and holy cow, there is Bill Ayers. Bill Ayers, after his father was basically second in command to Mayor Richard Daley in Chicago. And when all of that stuff was going on, Bill Ayers basically inherited control of the Communist Party USA that was headquartered basically in Chicago, where he grew up also. And watching or learning more about Bill Ayers and all the stuff that was coming out, the connections between him and Obama, the easiest thing to put together, to put the whole picture together, was that the Dunhams, which is Obama's maternal grandparents, the Dunhams were in the Communist Party in Chicago. This fellow by the name of Frank Marshall Davis was also in the Communist Party in Chicago. Frank Marshall Davis wrote a lot of articles for the Chicago communist newspapers. The Dunhams moved to Kansas. Frank Marshall Davis moved to Kansas. The Dunhams moved to Hawaii, and their daughter, Ann Stanley Dunham, she's going to communist schools. She gets communist background. She falls in love with a communist from Nigeria, well, Barack Obama Sr. That's what it was. She got pregnant by him. They got married. All the thing about where he was born is just, they got divorced, and so she married another communist Muslim from Indonesia, Soetoro. Do you remember the name Soetoro, any of you? He became Barry Soetoro. And when they broke up, now Obama's 9 or 10 years old, and what are we going to do with this kid while we're all separated? They said, send him back to the islands to Uncle Frank's mentorship. So Frank Marshall Davis was mentoring Obama for about another 9 years until Obama was 18 years old. And they said it's time for him to go to the mainland. Now, get this connection. Frank Marshall Davis, who does he know back here in the mainland that could continue mentoring this bright, articulate, well-spoken, mulatto, you know, half black, half white person, but his old buddy from the Chicago Communist Party, Bill Ayers. From the time Obama landed in the United States, he was and still is under the mentorship of Bill Ayers. Everything points in that direction. I thought, after looking at this guy's background, no way in hell is he ever going to get elected, because surely McCain will be able to talk about him being a radical communist, raised by a radical communist and mentored by radical communists, and McCain never mentioned it, and I thought, well, they must be strategically holding off on that till some last moment before the election, when an Air Force captain, I believe it was, at one of these town halls with McCain, a guy in uniform said, sir, why don't you bring up the fact that your opponent is a known communist? He was the president of the new party out of Chicago. It was strictly communist. He had worked with Bill Ayers on the Annenberg Foundation, which was to put communist propaganda into the schools, and there was another Woods Foundation too. They shared offices together, Bill Ayers, and there was you go to that building now, and there's still the door that went in between them. And I'm thinking, wow. Well, anyway, this Air Force captain is saying, you've got to start coming up with this stuff. And oh, no, Obama's really a nice guy and all that. And I thought at that moment, we're in deep trouble. We're in deep trouble now. And it seems that McCain was starting to do okay when we had a certain thing called the financial crisis of 2008. Do any of you remember that? triggered by Acorn. Do you remember Acorn had been out pushing substandard loans absolutely everywhere with the support of the federal government? Andy Stern was Acorn. Andy Stern was in the Weather Underground with Bill Ayers since way back in the 60s. Okay? That was all pretty much brought about, I believe, on purpose because Obama was falling behind in the polls. It had been being set up for a long, long time. A lot of people are saying this, the stability of the home loan business is really getting tricky, and they chose that time to spring it on the American public, and it made Obama look like he got elected. Another thing that was going on, Service Employees International Union, okay? Andy Stern. Who's Andy Stern? Andy Stern was one of Bill Ayers' buddies from back in the Weather Underground days, doing all the bombings and the communist stuff that they were doing. And now he's in charge of this international union that is handling most of the people that work in Washington, D.C. and other offices that are unionized. It's Service Employees International Union. And all these people were gathered around Obama. And I thought, geez, we're in deep now, you know. So let's move forward to now. Do you remember ever seeing the interview with Patrice Cullors, who was the president of Black Lives Matter, where she says, well, we are Marxists trained by Eric Mann from the Weather Underground. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Who was Eric Mann? Bill Ayers was the head of the Weather Underground. You know, Bill Ayers had gone into education, you know, and here he had one of his acolytes training the people in Black Lives Matter, and it turned out also training the people in Antifa to do just like the brown shirts for Hitler did, and just like what was done in Russia when the communists took over those countries. 2008. For those of you people really interested in education and where education's going, this is fascinating. I wrote down the name of the organization. 2008, Bill Ayers got elected to the vice president of, what did I write? Vice President of Curriculum Studies for the American Educational Research Association. They're the ones that write curriculum for school teachers in college. Let that sink in. Now you wonder why all of this baloney that is coming up that we're discovering that's going on in our schools today, where did that come from? We've been infiltrated. Our school system, like my college professor said, you'll run off to the thrills and spills of the private sector and leave it to us. Remember when they said that? And we did. They took over the school systems, and they're the ones that are bringing about all this stuff that's causing our children and grandchildren to say, you know, we've got it all wrong. Communism is the best thing, you know, for everybody. Now they're talking about the Great Reset. Biden has talked, yes ma'am.
Oh, I was going to say that. Hillary really pushed that reset like that.
They're all pushing it now. Sure. You go to those economic forums that take place in Davos, Switzerland, or you go to Aspen, Colorado. That's what they're all talking about, is how they're going to implement the Great Reset. The Great Reset is the largest communist takeover movement that we will probably ever see in our lifetime. And if there isn't a stop put to it, here's what they'll tell you. They have determined that all of the problems in the world have been caused by the individual's ownership of property. Okay? But no socioeconomic program in the history of the world has ever brought more people out of poverty than free market capitalism. Milton Friedman said that in an interview with Phil Donahue on the Donahue Show decades ago, when Donahue was trying to talk about how great socialism will be, and he asked him, well, where is that place? Where is that place where the socialistic program you're talking about has been tried? All of the last century, you know, it's all on film. What the communist Russians did to the people, what Hitler did to the people, what Mao Zedong did to the people, what Pol Pot did to the people in Cambodia, murder by the thousands of people that they felt didn't fit in. Now, at the same time now, all these people that we're worried about, from Fauci, you know, and Bill Gates and whatnot, talking about how we must radically reduce the population of the world. And this great reset is what they're going to put in its place, which means if they get all this control, every courthouse going to have people taking all the records of the courthouse out on the front lawn and burning them. Any one of you really proud of the home you're living, that you worked most of your life to be able to scrimp and save and put it together? The Great Reset comes along, you don't own that house anymore, and if one of their people happens to like your house, you get moved out and they get moved in. The government owns everything under this Great Reset. It's one of the, I mean, it's unimaginable, it seems unimaginable that such a thing could happen to the country and to the world. But when I look back to 1963, when I had this communist political science professor saying, this is what they're going to do, and me thinking that they would never pull it off, you know, where was it? Goal number 20, infiltrate the press. A girl, this is in East Los Angeles, California, that grew up in our neighborhood just right around the corner from me. Her name was Terry Schaefer. Well, Terry, she was head of the journalism department, and for our little Titan yearbook and our monthly newsletters that came out. Well, I'm going to Missouri, to the University of Missouri, to study journalism. And Terry, why are you going there? She says, well, the whole journalism department is communist. And you're going to Missouri she ends up marrying the head of the journalism department, and her last name is now Bergman. Now, this is a girl that I grew up with that moved from Southern California out to Missouri to attend the communist indoctrination of their journalism department in 1963. Now, what do they do with these people? Well, when you control their grades and you control the reviews they get that send out to potential employers, if you're a capitalist and have been, you know, you get bad grades in the class because you don't agree with the professor, you know, and do you get sent out to go work for NBC if you want to? No, they take one of their best communists in their class and send them there. Goal number 20, infiltrate the press. You want to work in newspapers, whatever it is that you want to work for, those people that have kissed up to the professor and gone along with their indoctrination program, they get moved. You want to go into charity, okay? They've got somebody working in the Red Cross, and now the next thing you know, the Red Cross is filled up with people who basically have a communist philosophy on things. You could call it socialist, whatnot. You know, they would rather be called progressives, or they would rather be called
socialists.
The left, whatnot. Last thing they want to be called is a communist, because communism has some carryover from the previous century as far as the worst of that attitude. That's what I think is going on. And, Trump said he was going to drain the swamp, which would get rid of all the criminal element in there. But that would also mean he's going to be stumbling on all the communists that are... one more point. 2010, we elected Tom Schweik to be our state auditor. Do any of you remember Tom? I got to know Tom pretty well, and he came out to a Republican club meeting here at the lake, and he said, I've been going through St. Louis to all the people that got stimulus money from the Obama administration and said, let's see your books on what you did with this money. And Tom Schweik said this out in public many times, so it's a matter of record. And they said, we don't have it, we didn't keep any books on it. What do you mean you didn't keep? Well, we were told we didn't have to keep any books on what we did with the money, so we don't know where it went. They were talking about billions of dollars given out to basically left-wing socialist organizations within this state and every other state. Told they didn't have to account for the money. What do you think they did with that money? They fed it back to the politicians who made sure they got on the rolls to get all this free money. That's why even though the communists may be in an actual minority here in the United States, but it's ever-growing numbers because we keep graduating, every graduating class shoves more of them out in the system. But they're being funded by us taxpayers out of these grants and whatnot that nobody keeps track of where the money goes. So we've got the money angle working against us, we've got the press working against us, we've got schools that are just pumping our kids full of so much garbage. It's just unimaginable. And people saying, well, gee, these people in charge are just stupid people and they're just making all these mistakes. Who are the stupid people in our situation?
Exactly.
Who are the stupid people who are afraid to call it out for what it is? They have actually worked their people into every aspect of our culture, every aspect of our government. They have now got their people into virtually every aspect of our industries, to where we're bankrupting the country by sending all of our jobs and industry overseas. We're paying people here not to work, and we have Republicans in office who are saying the Democrats are just stupid and they're doing this all wrong. No, they're not. They're doing it on purpose. I've been imploring these people to say, please say it might be on purpose, or, it could be on purpose, or say it is on purpose, but don't be saying these progressives are just stupid people. That's feeding in to everything they need to be able to continue to perpetuate this mess.